Well, good morning once again, and welcome to Pontiac Church. How are you today? Hey, it's a beautiful day outside. The sun is shining on the outside and on the inside, if you can't tell. And it's so great to have you here. If we haven't had a chance to meet, my name is Dustin McClellan. I have the privilege of serving as the lead pastor here at Pontiac Church. And thanks so much for being with us today, for joining us. If you slipped in during the course of our gathering, as Derek mentioned at the very beginning, take a moment, would you? Fill out that connection card right underneath your seat. That's our way to get to know you just a little bit better, especially if it is your first time. That connection card is a great way to stay connected with us. If there's a step that you would like to take, or you have a prayer need or anything, you can drop that right there on that card, and you can turn that into our guest experience table at the end. We would love the opportunity to get to know you just a little bit better. And hey, I want to just give you a quick update. If you were tracking, you saw that we're having a work day here in a couple of weeks at our brand new location, 1685 Baldwin Avenue is where we're going to be, in a permanent location. And the Lord has provided that for us. And it's taken us a little while. But we are now ready for our next step. Our building plans are ready to go. And so God is doing incredible things. So join us for that work day. We'll be putting out the registration, everything on socials and via email. But pray with us. Over the next few months, we're going to be taking steps to get into this location. And there's going to be some faith steps. Faith steps that we're going to take together, and I'll be laying those out for you over these next couple of weeks into the month of June. But one of those steps, faith steps, that I'll be asking you to take is to just be bold and audacious in your giving. And so many of you have done just that. You are giving here to Pontiac Church, helping what we do make it possible. But as we step into that building, not only as we are now leaseholders, but also covering all of the construction costs, all of the materials that it's going to take, all of the chairs we're going to need. It's going to take all of us doing our part. And so I want to encourage you today, if you haven't taken that step, today is a great day to begin to give and to sow and give back to God. And I'll be sharing more in the upcoming weeks about the specific needs and specific opportunities that you'll have to be a part through giving. One more update, highlight I want to give to you is just something we have on our website. I'd love for you to just plug into this from time to time. We just call it Life Change Stories. If you've been a part of Pontiac Church for any length of time, and God has moved in your heart, moved in your life, whether you're new to faith or there's been some other kind of testimony or miracle that God has done, I want to encourage you, scan that QR code. You can go to our website and find the link. If you want to draft something on the back of the connection card, we want to hear from you. We want to celebrate those testimonies, those stories, those victories, and all that God has been doing in your life and also doing in our church. Well, hey, I'm excited today to kick off a brand new series entitled All In. All In. And we're going to be looking together at this principle of going all in, because we as a church have been journeying together officially for 8 months, and it's been a lot of fun, and God's done a lot of things and brought a lot of people in, and we just believe that we're just getting started and the best is yet to come. But we just feel like the Lord is calling us as a church and calling those that call Pontiac Church home to go to another level, to go all in, to get down to business. We're going to talk about what that's all about. We just believe this, that when we choose to follow Jesus, it's all or nothing. It's a commitment not only of our hearts and of our lives or a portion of ourselves or our spiritual person. It is a call for us to give everything to Jesus. We believe this principle. If Jesus is not Lord of all, then Jesus is not Lord at all. And Jesus is calling us to give our entire selves to Him. We're living in a culture that is full of compromise. And we believe that we must resolve to live our entire lives all in for the one true God. Now, when you walked in today, you got a poker chip. Now, you've probably been wondering, why in the world did they give me a poker chip up in church? Now, just stay with me for a second, all right? Now, I don't know anything about poker, okay? I've never played poker. I've never been to the casino. I don't know blackjack from a flapjack. I know nothing about it at all, okay? And so this is purely an illustration today, all right? But I firmly believe this, that the world and the culture has taken our term and our expression that is given uniquely to the body of Jesus Christ. The term all in has been relegated to a poker table or a casino or to gambling. The expression of being all in has been given over to the ball courts that say, hey, I'm going to leave it all on the field, man. I'm going to leave it all on the table. The term all in has been given over to our workplaces to say, I'm going to give my entire life for this job or this thing. Let me tell you something today. The only thing and the only person that we're supposed to be all in for is God. Well, that was weak. I need to give you a few more of these poker chips so you can start to get things in right alignment. This is going to be a good series. It's needed, clearly. And so, yeah, I'm just shooting straight with you. So, hold on to that poker chip, okay? We'll tell you more about it at the end. And my hope is that not only during this series, but also during, I knew that was going to happen, also during this message, that you'll go all in. And that any assumptions you have about being a follower of Jesus Christ, anything you've learned before about being all in church, any preconceived notions that you have, that you would leave those aside so that today, and during the course of this series, you can have a new perspective about what it means to follow Jesus. Jesus has called us to be completely sold out for Him, and our pursuit of following Jesus to be completely all in. We look today at our theme verse for the series, that's 2 Chronicles 16:9. It's one of my favorite verses in all of Scripture. It just simply says this: for the eyes of the Lord range throughout the earth. The King James Version says to and fro throughout the land to strengthen those whose hearts are fully committed to Him. To those that choose to be all in, to those that choose to be fully committed, fully surrendered to Jesus, those are the ones He's looking for, and those are the ones that He wants to strengthen and give the power and the ability to live out life on the earth. And so my prayer is that during this series, you'll take inventory of your life, inventory of your journey, and take a look at every area, every aspect, every crevice, every decision, every place you go, everything you do, so that every part of your life would be completely all in and sold out for the Lord Jesus Christ. That's what we want to do together. As a backdrop for this series, we're going to be looking together at the book of Daniel. The book of Daniel. So if you have a copy of God's Word, why don't you swing over to Daniel. Daniel chapter 1 is where we're going to start today. And we're going to be looking all throughout this book and life and story of Daniel. Daniel is one of the major prophets in the Old Testament. A major, not only being significant, but this being one of the larger prophetic texts that's given to us. And it's broken down into two portions, chapters 1 through 6, being the very personal stories that Daniel shares about his journey and also the journey of his friends, his buddies. We're going to be looking at their stories. Daniel and Shadrach and Meshach and Abednego will be looking at those over the course of this series. The second 6 chapters are of prophetic significance, as Daniel gives us a little bit of a snapshot on what's going to occur in the end times. If you didn't know this, there is going to be an end time. At some point, Jesus is going to return to the earth, and this whole thing is going to wrap up. And we have to prepare for that, and we have to live like that. And we're going to talk a little bit about that during the course of this series. But I'm also going to be challenging you and asking you to do something along with us, and that is to read through a portion of the book of Daniel. We're going to take a look, especially in this series, at Daniel chapters 1 through 6. I challenged some of our men that are in our men's group. I sent a devotional out to them to get a jump start on this series, and we've been reading through that together and having some discussion online. It's been really, really great. But I want to encourage you to take some time to read this with us. We'll put this out on socials and everywhere else. But this next week in particular, would you read Daniel chapter 1? It's a simple read. It's an easy read. It's not too tough or there's not a lot of big words or names. It's a great read. And so I want to encourage you. I see some people snapping a picture of it. Snap a picture of it. Put it in your phone. That way you can go on the app. You can get into it. But we want to read together at Daniel chapter 1. We're going to look at that passage in particular a little more in depth next week. But this will be a great time not only to go all in together in our faith and spiritual journey, but also specifically in the reading of God's Word so that we can get it inside of us, which is critically important. Now, this scene that we see in the book of Daniel begins around 600 BC. And the book of Daniel really covers the some 70 years of Daniel's captivity in Babylon. Daniel, who was a Jew, was forced to live in a culture that was not his own. Yet he resolved, and this is what I want you to begin to see, to live distinctively and uniquely for God. Over the next few weeks, we're going to look at some of those 70 years together. And we're going to look at some of the things that Daniel had to do. And even though he went through some challenging moments, he still chose to have a high standard of living for God. When Daniel in chapter 1 was encouraged to defile himself with choice food and drink, he continued to live all in for God. He went through the risk of his life to reveal the mysteries of God to the king. He watched his friends thrown into a fiery furnace for choosing to only worship the one true God. He was punished for praying. He was thrown into a lion's den, and he survived 5 kings, yet still was completely sold out for God. Daniel, unlike some biblical leaders, doesn't have a moral failure, doesn't make a bunch of critical mistakes. He simply had a life lived completely and totally for God. And because of that, Daniel's life was incredibly blessed. He found favor with God. And it was an incredible journey that we're going to have the chance to look at together. And as we look together at Daniel today, I want to talk to you with a message entitled, How to Survive Captivity. How to Survive Captivity. Let's take a look. Daniel chapter 1. We're going to begin reading in verse 1. It says this, In the 3rd year of the reign of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came to Jerusalem and besieged it. And the Lord delivered Jehoiakim, king of Judah, into his hand, along with some of the articles from the temple of God. These he carried off to the temple of his God, this is Nebuchadnezzar, in Babylonia, and put in the treasure house of his God. In order to survive captivity, there's a few things that we need today to learn today. And the first thing is this: we need to learn the plot. Learn the plot. Here we see in this passage, and there's Jeremiah gives in more detail exactly what happens, because the book of Jeremiah, some portions of it happen concurrently with the book of Daniel. And so you can take a look at Jeremiah to get an even closer glimpse of what is happening here. But it's there that it tells us that the king of Judah, Jehoiakim, is given over to the king of Nebuchadnezzar. And it is the people of God that have fallen into Nebuchadnezzar and that are placed into exile and led into captivity right into the place of Babylon. And Daniel and his friends are among those that are on exile from Israel. And oftentimes we focus on the captivity of Daniel and his friends. But there's another captivity that's trying to take place in this passage. It's Nebuchadnezzar, as we see there in this passage, that took articles from the temple of God, the temple there in Jerusalem. He carried them off to his temple of his God in Babylonia. And in this passage, not only is it Daniel and his friends and the Jewish people that are being taken captive, but they're also trying to take captive of the God of Israel. And whenever someone tries to take captive of our God, watch out, bad things are going to happen. They tried to take captive of the one true God, Yahweh, as his Hebrew name is displayed and described. But whenever somebody tries to put our God in a box, it is a recipe for disaster. And let that be a notice to the world around us today, because everywhere we look, people are trying to take our God captive. This is the plot. This is the movement happening all around us today to make our world and this country in particular more secular, meaning without God in every single way. You can't even say the Pledge of Allegiance anymore, in case you might offend somebody. But last time I checked, this is still one nation under God. Nothing has changed. Yet they're trying to take God captive. They're trying to legislate him. They're trying to put him in one place or another. But you cannot put God in a box. It's time the people of God to go all in and to let God loose. It's a Nebuchadnezzar that's trying to put God in a box because that is his very name. Nebuchadnezzar, Nebuchadnezzar's father gave him that name. His name simply means Nebu. Nebu, protect my son. Nebu is the Babylonian god of wisdom, learning, prophecy, scribes, and writing. And so it's no surprise that when we begin to look at the book of Daniel and all of the things that Daniel began to go through, as he was just in Daniel chapter 1, commanded to line up with the Babylonian culture and to do as they did and to talk as they did and to walk as they did. They were trying to align Daniel not with his God, Yahweh, but with Nebuchadnezzar's God of Nebu. It's Isaiah 46 and verse 1 that says this: Baal bows down, Nebu, speaking of Nebuchadnezzar's God, stoops low. Their idols are borne by beasts of burden. The images that are carried about are burdensome, a burden for the weary. They stoop and bow down together, unable to rescue the burden. They themselves go off into captivity. Last time I checked, I don't want a God that is in captivity himself or bows low himself, but I want to be beholden. I want to bow to the one true God. Why captivity, you may ask? Why is Daniel and his buddies and the other people in Israel, why are they taken captive by Nebuchadnezzar? Why did they have to spend this some 70 years in Babylon in exile away from the place of God? Two reasons. Number one was a consequence of their own idolatry. The Israelite people constantly, over and over and over again, forgot to worship and follow the one true God. And so they continued to worship false gods and false idols. And this was a consequence of their lives of compromise and consistently giving in to the enemy of their souls and the cultural and world around them. Number two, it was to set up Daniel for a place of leadership, a place of authority, and a place of influence, even in the midst of Babylon. And we see throughout Daniel's life that he was placed in moments of influence, and he lived his life with excellence. But this captivity that we see Daniel in, this captivity that they seemingly wanted to place our God in, it's that same type of captivity that is trying to come to us every single day in our lives. That's the plot. That's the modern day plot coming to us every single day. The enemy of our souls has a plot for us. He has a desire for you. He has a specific way he wants you to go, on specific place he wants to take you. John 10:10 says the enemy comes to steal, kill, and destroy. It's 1 Peter chapter 5 and verse 8 that says that he's prowling like a lion, waiting for someone that he can devour and someone that he can destroy. And in times of struggle, it can feel like the enemy is right up against us, trying to overtake us, trying to destroy us. Sometimes it feels like the devil is simply against us. I've heard people say the term, well, the devil is just busy. And he is. He's always busy. That's all he knows to do. That's his job. That's his plot, is to be busy and to come up with tactics and schemes to try to get you off course, to beat you down. That's his goal. To make you captive to sin, to become a slave to sin, so that sin would be your God. That's the enemy's goal. Is that you would be beholden to the enemy, that sin would be your God, and your life would be a life of compromise. John 8:34 says this, Very truly, I tell you, everyone who sins is a slave to sin, and that is the enemy's plot, is to make you a slave to sin. That's not the only plot, but the other plot is to make you captive to this world. It's to make you captive to the culture around us. That whatever the culture is doing and whatever the culture is saying, and the culture isn't some crazy thing that's off in the sky and off the culture is just what's happening all around us in our neighborhoods, in our world, in our workplaces, and anyone who isn't following Jesus and isn't on this journey is doing. And the enemy wants you to be beholden to that culture. He wants you to be captive to it. But he also wants you to be captive to a fractional following of Jesus Christ. A fractional following of Jesus Christ. That you would not fully follow Jesus in every way and in everything, but that you would only follow him in part, in the ways that you want, the ways that maybe you need. Now, I wasn't very good at fractions in school. I wasn't very good at division either. In fact, I still, if you put a paper in front of me today, I do not know that I could figure out long division. I can stare at it as long as I want and nothing would change. But today, we need to understand this thing about fractional living and fractional Christians. Because a time is coming when a fractional following of Jesus Christ will not be enough. Having 1 foot in and 1 foot out won't cut it. And we've got to make a decision and make a choice to follow Jesus. Daniel speaks of the end times in Daniel 7 through 12. And if today you think that the culture is bad and the world is messed up and that the world is evil, it's only getting worse. And I know that those times are coming when you'll be challenged and you'll be questioned. Do you follow Jesus or do you not? And there'll be consequences for those that choose to follow Jesus. Earthly consequences. And the question is, when that time comes, what will your response be? If you're a fractional Christian, you're only a Christian for the moment. You're only a Christian when it's convenient, when it's comfortable. And when that time comes, you'll give in. But if you're all in and sold out for Jesus, whatever is done to you, whatever is said about you, whatever the consequences of this world are, whatever canceling takes place, it will not matter because you've chosen to live sold out for God. It's Revelation chapter 3 and verse 16 that says this: so because you are lukewarm, neither hot or cold, I'm about to spit you out of my mouth. And the question today is, are you lukewarm? Are you hot? Are you cold? Are you on fire for God? Are you sold out for God? Are you all in? Have you given him your all? Have you chosen to make him the very Lord of your life? This is not a thing that you can be 1 foot in with and 1 foot out with. But you've got to make a concerted effort. Say, Jesus, you can have all of me, no matter what. That is the choice that Daniel made. He chose to be all in when the culture was raging against him, when he was in captivity. Daniel chapter 1 tells the story. We're going to look at it next week in detail. Tells the story of the choices that he made to be completely sold out for God, even when the culture was telling him to do otherwise. He chose to be all in. It's in Daniel chapter 2 that Daniel, having gone through an incredible exchange in Daniel chapter 1, you got to come back. We're going to unpack it more next week. He ends up in Daniel chapter 2, and because of his stick-to-itness, he has been placed in a position of authority and of favor. And King Nebuchadnezzar has realized that Daniel is following somebody different than who he follows. He is following the one true God. And it's in the book of Daniel chapter 2 that Nebuchadnezzar is troubled in his mind and troubled in his heart because he's had a series of dreams that he can't quite figure out. And as he cannot interpret these dreams, it's Nebuchadnezzar that calls for the astrologers and the magicians and the enchanters and the sorcerers. He's calling for somebody somewhere to help him crack these dreams. But nobody anywhere can do it. But Daniel hears of his troubles and of his circumstances, and he says, let me have a crack at it. Here's what Daniel says in Daniel chapter 2 and verse 27. It says this: Daniel replied, no wise man, enchanter, magician, or diviner can explain to the king the mystery he has asked about. But there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries. He goes on to say in verse 44, this is after he begins to tell him about the dream. He begins to reveal to him what it's all about. He says, in the time of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that will never be destroyed, nor will it be left to another people. It will crush all those kingdoms and bring them to an end, but it will itself will endure forever. If you want to learn how to survive captivity, not only do you have to understand and learn the plot, but you have to understand who reigns. Daniel knew that there was no man, no enchanter, no magician, no hocus pocus that could solve Nebuchadnezzar's trouble. There was nobody that could reveal those dreams. There was nobody that could do it but God. He said it in verse 27. There's nobody that can do it, but there's a God in heaven who reveals mysteries. It was Daniel, who was only about 16 or 17 years of age in this passage, that understood what takes some of us 50 years to begin to understand. It's that when you're troubled, you can call experts, you can check your horoscope, you can try Epsom salts if you want. Now that kind of works sometimes. You can try education. You can try drugs and alcohol, and after you've tried it all, try Jesus. He does what no wise man of the earth can do. He can reveal mysteries and bring divine order to our lives. We have taken incredible time in this world and in this culture and our country to understand the moon and the stars. We put a man on the moon. We put spacecraft on Mars. We've done incredible things out in space. And while we've been out there encountering outer space, we've forgotten to conquer our inner space. And it's the conquering of Daniel's inner space that began to set him up from 15 years of age to live captivity in a land for 70 years, to the point that when he's 85 years old, he's thrown into a lion's den, but he had figured it out on the inside. He had a resolve on the inside. He had understood who reigns on the inside, and that is the God of heaven and earth, and that's what sustained him through everything. And today, we need to figure things out on the inside. We need to go all in with our entire life, with our emotions, with our physical man, with our mind, and most importantly, our souls. And we need to tell our entire selves that it is God who reigns. All of who we are needs to come in alignment with the God of the universe. We look further, Daniel chapter 4 helps us unpack this thought further. It's not only Nebuchadnezzar having troubled dreams, but he's having them all the time. And he has this dream of a large tree that is big and prosperous and amazing. And in Daniel chapter 4, he has a dream that this tree is cut down. And Daniel begins to interpret this dream for Nebuchadnezzar and begins to tell him that it really has to do with his own life, as he's been a man that is following this false god of Nebu, and he's made himself an idol and placed himself above all other gods and before the people. Here's what he says in verse 25. You will be driven away from the people and will live with the wild animals. You will eat grass like the ox and be drenched with the dew of heaven. 7 times will pass by for you until you acknowledge that the Most High is sovereign over all kingdoms on earth and gives them to anyone he wishes. Look at verse 26. It says this. The command to leave the stump of the tree, talking about Nebuchadnezzar, with its roots means that your kingdom will be restored to you when you acknowledge that heaven rules. Nebuchadnezzar had not yet decided and made a declaration that it was the God of heaven that rules and reigns. And so the dream was just simply this. Until your life comes in the right alignment, you will remain a stump. And it'll be that way until you declare that heaven rules. Even this great king of Babylon had to be torn down so that he could fully acknowledge and understand who God is. The question today is this: do you acknowledge that heaven rules? Does God rule and reign in your life? Does he rule and reign in your heart? Have you allowed him to take over every aspect of your life and every aspect of your person? Church, it's time that we begin to let God rule and reign in our hearts and in our lives. We need to let God rule and reign in our marriages. Let God rule and reign in your family and in your children. Let God rule and reign in your relationships. Let God rule and reign in your finances. Let him rule in your mind. Let him rule in your fears. Let him rule in your body. Let him rule in your decisions. Let him reign on your job. Let him reign in everything. Because until you do that, you'll be like Nebuchadnezzar, torn down just like a stump. But if you choose to let him rule and reign, God will establish you in an incredible way. And that's what Nebuchadnezzar, that's what happened to him. At the end of this chapter, the dream came to fruition, but he made a choice. He said, I'm going to acknowledge the one true God. And the Bible says that he was established, he flourished, he ruled and reigned with integrity at the end of his life. And he declared that the God of heaven rules and reigns. The question today is, have you allowed that God to rule and reign in your life? Would you stand with me today? As we look at how to survive captivity, not only do we have to learn the plot, not only do we have to understand that God rules and reigns, but we've got to live our lives on purpose. We've got to live life on purpose. It's in Daniel chapter 6 and verse 5 that Daniel, over the course of his life, has just begun to serve and live for God in such an incredible way that this is what they said about him. The people were jealous of him and his favor and blessing. This is what they say: we will never find any basis for charges against this man Daniel unless it has something to do with the law of his God. Wouldn't it be incredible if that could be said of us? That we were completely sold out and completely all in for God in such a way that the only thing that people could try and trip us up on is our relationship and following with Jesus. That is going all in for God. And so today I want to challenge you to live on purpose. I want to challenge you to make your life count for God. I want to challenge you to go all in. The incredible thing about Daniel is that Daniel came not only to stand strong, not only to be bold, but to change the very culture around him. I like to think of Daniel in this way. Daniel, he wasn't one that was easily swayed or easily changed. He wasn't a thermometer. Probably using your thermometer a little bit less these days because it's springtime and sickness all of a sudden goes away. But when you use a thermometer, you're checking the temperature of something. Daniel didn't come to check the temperature of the culture. He came to be like a thermostat. A thermostat changes the temperature. And God is calling us to live life on purpose in such a way that we will change and transform and impact the culture around us. But that only happens when we choose to be all in for Him. How can we be all in for Him? So when we choose not to live lives of compromise. Here's our big idea. It says this: a cycle of compromise will lead to a life of captivity. And today we can't allow even one part of our lives to be compromised. We can't allow sin to be in any portion of our journey. Can't allow the enemy to be able to place a foothold anywhere. This is what compromise looks like. Look at this bridge, this picture here. That's compromise. The bridge is compromised. If you live here in Pontiac, you travel the MLK Bridge near St. Joe's or Trinity Health, the bridge is shut down because the bridge has been compromised. Here's the thing about it, though. If you look at that bridge, you could still walk over that bridge. You could still maybe even drive over that bridge. That bridge here in Pontiac, people were driving over that bridge for years and it was compromised. We didn't even know it. And you can be a Christian. You can follow God. You can come to church. You can walk across that bridge. You can keep walking and walking and walking. But if you're not all in, sooner or later, that bridge is going to break. But if you choose to live without compromise, if you choose to go all in, I tell you what, God will establish you and strengthen you. He's looking for someone who is completely committed to Him so that He can strengthen them and use them and call them and challenge them to change the world. So would you bow your head with me today? Would you close your eyes for just a moment? I have just one ask today, one prayer to pray. I'm going to ask it over the course of this series over and over again, but pointedly today. Are you all in? Why don't you take a minute and do a self-check? Do an inventory of your life and your journey. God, today you are looking for a church and a people that is completely sold out for you. You're looking for people that have chosen to live without compromise. People that are not swayed by the world, swayed by the enemy, swayed by sin, but would just begin to say, no matter what comes my way, no matter what temptation exists, no matter what fear, anxiety, I'm going to live for Jesus.